Hello and welcome to DFS Coach Talk. It is Friday, October 29th, 2021. I am Andrew Hanson alongside Josh Crash Davis. We've got the Week 8 main slate ready to go for you, position by position. But it looks like my partner is still thinking about the Week 8 Thursday night football game with his Packers hat on. Congratulations to you, Josh. Packers with a nice win on the road, and you had a nice cashing lineup for us on FanDuel with Jones as one of the key plays for you.
Yeah, that was a really surprising win. I know for a lot of people, I actually did pick Green Bay to win that game last night. I knew it was going to be close, but I just had a feeling that they were going to come out and do exactly what they did, and that was take the ball out of Aaron Rodgers' hands and just pound it. You know, they only ran, I think, about 9 times with Dillon and Jones against Washington. So it just said to me they're gonna rely on them heavily in this game. And that's what they did. And they kept Murray and the Cardinals' explosive offense off the field. And Jones was obviously a huge part of that. So
yeah, Dillon looked good to me too. I mean, that was a nice weapon to have. That 1-2 punch was very effective, and you had that game plan nailed. Meanwhile, I had a lot of exposure to Murray, to Hopkins. And when he was streaking down the sideline for the touchdown, everything was looking good until he wasted that face mask penalty. I mean, ridiculous. 6 points taken away there, and then it went downhill from there. But we chatted here a little bit before the show about this main slate, and we're pretty aligned, especially at quarterback. So I'm excited that we can build some winners for our members here and the listeners and viewers on DraftKings and FanDuel, and then Yahoo, of course. So you ready to get after it?
I am ready.
Right. Beautiful. Let's start at quarterback and potential pay-up option. Do you have somebody in mind?
Yeah, I'm looking at Josh Allen. He's 8,100 on DraftKings. He is the most expensive quarterback, but I mean, it's for a good reason. He's been on a tear the last 4 weeks with 32, 39, 21, and 40 DraftKings points. Going up against the Miami Dolphins defense that has allowed the third most fantasy points to quarterbacks. And for his career, he's done really well against them. He's averaged just under 30 DraftKings points against them in his career. And he's going to be my main quarterback in my cash games and single entry tournaments. And he's projected, for pretty high ownership. But like I said, it's for a good reason. Pro Football Focus has him projected as the highest scoring quarterback this week. So that's definitely where I'm going to start my lineups.
Yeah, he didn't have to do too much when they beat Miami the first time around. But I would think that, there'd be some regression there. And with Miami playing a little bit better with Tua, then I think that's a strong play. Certainly probably won't go wrong there. If you want to save a little bit of money, the first guy I'm looking at is Joe Burrow here, 7,100 on DraftKings. So you save 1,000. He's got the Jets, and they are 10.5-point favorites. Not a great total here, 43, but we're going to blame that on the Jets and their anemic offense.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of those games where it's kind of pick your poison because the Jets defense, they're bad against the pass and the run. And we've got a couple games like that this week. But, the reason I like Burrow is that if you just look at the stats for fantasy points, the Jets have only given up the 5th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised.
Yeah, but if you dig in, look at who they played weeks 1 through 4. Carolina, New England, Denver, and Tennessee. What's the main theme there? Those teams want to run it.
In the football, yeah.
Yeah, they don't have big passing attacks. They just, when the Jets did face Atlanta here, Matt Ryan 342-2, and that's the type of game I think we'll get from Burrow. He's had 2 or 3 touchdowns in every single game this year, 6 in the last 2 weeks. Remember, he threw for over 400 yards against Baltimore. So I think this is one of those stats that just doesn't reflect the team and how they can be beaten through the air. So I think Burrow has a big week this week.
Yeah, I like Burrow a lot. Him and Jamar Chase have really just burst onto the scene this year. So going to be looking to hook them up in tournaments quite a bit this week as well.
Yes, sir.
So for my next play, I'm going to be looking at a little bit cheaper. Going to be going with Carson Wentz, 5,700 on DraftKings. In my opinion, he's probably the best value quarterback. He's got an awesome matchup against the Titans, who've allowed the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. Just below 6K. feel like he's a really good value play. And, earlier in the year, he was kind of struggling a little bit, but lately he's thrown for 8 touchdowns and 0 interceptions in his last 4 starts. He's really starting to look more like the Carson Wentz that we saw under Frank Reich in Philadelphia when he was playing at that MVP level. So I've been really impressed with Wentz the last several weeks, and I'm looking to go back to him this week at home against Tennessee.
Yeah, I agree. The trend here for him really going in the right direction. Now on the season, 11 touchdowns, only 1 interception. He does have 3 fumbles that he's lost, but taking care of the ball better and really, really trending how we want. 4 straight games with exactly 2 touchdowns. So nice price option there. I've got another guy in that price range I want to mention, Trevor Lawrence, 5,500 this week on DraftKings. He gets Seattle, number 27 against the pass. And this is another one of those matchups that I was referencing because they're number 30 against the run. So I'm looking to target that defense here with multiple Jaguars. The other thing I like about Jacksonville is that they had the bye week. I really like to target teams that have been rested with a bye week, or even if they played the Thursday before, just those few extra days, especially if you're going to use a running back. But with the passing attack here, Lawrence went into that bye week with a nice, strong game, 319 yards, 41 attempts against Miami, which I like, had a touchdown. And the other thing about Trevor Lawrence, he will carry it. He's averaging 4.5 carries a game for 20 yards. He's had 2 rushing touchdowns, and mobile quarterbacks have had success against Seattle. Jameis just ran it 8 times for 40 yards. Trey Lance, 7 carries for 41. Now, if he gets something in that range and a touchdown, you're looking at a nice 10-point bonus there.
Yeah.
Because he will keep it, in the red zone as well. So Trevor Lawrence, I like that he's throwing it more, gaining confidence, and I like that price tag.
Yeah, that price tag is really nice, and I'm sure he's going to be extremely low owned, so that's going to be a really nice tournament play.
All right, you got one more here? You ready to go to running backs?
I'm going to look at one more, little bit, cheaper again. Sam Darnold, 5,600. If you want to pivot from Carson Wentz, he's got a really good matchup against Atlanta. They allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to quarterbacks. He got off to a really strong start this year. He's kind of fallen off in the last several weeks, but I think in large tournaments, this is going to be a good option as he's going to be lower owned. And Atlanta has allowed 29.3 points per game to their opponents. So that's a 3rd most in the league. So I think that he can take advantage of that Atlanta defense. And like I said, for tournaments, he's a nice tournament value play.
Yeah, if you're playing multiple lineups, that could be somewhere to look, because I agree in that price range, he will be ultra low owned, and they've been running it more, and he hasn't been throwing for many touchdowns. So if he turns it around this week, then you'll be sitting pretty with that play. All right, let's hit some running backs here, Josh. Who's your first target in week 8?
Yeah, my first target, lately we've been looking to pay up at running back. And this week I'm looking to pay down a little bit. I'm looking, Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara are both great pay up options this week, but I'm kind of looking to save some salary with my current lineup construction. So I'm looking at Deandre Swift going up against Philadelphia that have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to running backs. Swift has scored the 2nd most fantasy points of all running backs this year and had his best game of the year last week against the tough Rams, defense. And he also saw 8 targets last week, and he's currently leading the league in receiving yards for running backs with 391. So for his price, an average of just under 20 DraftKings points per game, he's my top option in both cash and tournaments this week.
Yeah, and we're recording this Friday night. Jamal Williams right now does have the questionable tag. And Swift last week, 21 touches, even with Jamal. So I like that play as well, and we'll keep an eye on that news. James Robinson for me, mid-tier. I agree. I'd like to save a little money with running backs here this week. And he's got that great matchup against Seattle that I referenced. And you can pair him up with Lawrence, especially if you want to build a little bit of a game stack. It's not a great total here at 44, but with 2 bad defenses, sometimes you get a nice little surprise, high-scoring game. The other problem is that Seattle will try to run it. They love to run it. Geno is not necessarily ready to throw for 303, but I will pair up Lawrence with Robinson in some lineups. He's been getting right about 20 touches every week, and the reason I like this combo is because Seattle gives up a ton of receptions to running backs.
Mhm.
Kamara just had 10. Najee Harris had 6. Madison 6. The Tennessee guys had 9. Indianapolis back at the beginning of the season had 12. So you can really rack up the points, especially on DraftKings, if Lawrence dumps it to Robinson 5 or 6 times.
Yeah, I like that play. And like you said, Kamara, he was racking up the receptions against Seattle. So look for Robinson to do the same thing, and pairing him up with Lawrence, that even makes more sense. So for me, for my next running back, I'm looking at Damien Harris. I've played him quite a bit lately. He's 6,100 on DraftKings, coming off his best game of the year last week against the Jets. He scored a touchdown in 3 straight games now, and they're relying on him pretty heavily in the red zone. He's gotten 3 carries or more in the red zone the last 3 games, and the Chargers ranked 28th in fantasy points allowed against running backs. And I think that New England's going to rely heavily on their ground game, kind of like what we saw with Green Bay last night. The Chargers have allowed the 5th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks, so I think that they're going to rely heavily on the running game.
I do too. Great matchup. The thing that scares me is what happens with the game script. If New England can establish a run, get a lead, then I think Harris will be a great play. If not, they're playing from behind. He's only had 10 receptions this season, so I think he may get phased out a little bit. And because of that, he's a little bit touchdown dependent. He has gone over 100 yards here the last couple of weeks. So I do like the play, but just want to keep that in mind here. Anytime we play New England running backs, important to think about the game script. All right, I'm going to go with a value play here as the other running back I want to talk about, David Johnson. Yes, he is still a factor, especially with Ingram now on the move. It's his backfield along with Phillip Lindsay, and I think they'll share it, but the big thing here is look at the game script. They're playing the Rams. They're 14.5-point underdogs. It would be an absolute shock if they're not playing from behind all day. And he's the guy that's going to catch the ball out of the backfield. He's had 19 catches this year. Lindsay only 3. And, Johnson, even though they've had that 3-headed monster here recently, he's had 5 receptions in 2 of the last 3 games. And you mentioned it earlier, what Deandre Swift did against the Rams last week, catching passes. 8 for 96 and a score. The Tampa Bay backs had 12 catches against them. So I like David Johnson at that price. I really feel strongly that he'll hit value just catching the ball.
Yeah. There should be tons of usage, like you said, with Ingram, down in New Orleans again. Definitely like that play. Going to be low owned. Great tournament play. For me, for my value play, I'm looking at Kenneth Gainwell. He's 5,000 on DraftKings. Miles Sanders was already ruled out this week. Actually looking to see him more in the passing game. He saw 8 targets last week. He had 4 receptions for 41 yards and a touchdown. Detroit has allowed the 4th most fantasy points to running backs. And, at 5K, I feel like he's going to be a really good value play. I have seen quite a few people talking about him, so he could be higher owned, but I think that the opportunity is there for him to far exceed the value with the opportunities that he'll receive on Sunday.
Yeah, that'll be another interesting game script. What happens there with Philly and Detroit, and how many touches does he get? Because we know Hurts likes to hold on to it or throw it. So if he targets Gainwell, then great. All right, before we hit the pass catchers here, Josh, just want to invite folks to jump in with us. DFSCoachTalk.com. Grab our Week 8 lineups if you'd like. We do the full DraftKings clipboard with highlighted plays and a bunch of options to fill out your lineup. And then we give out the full lineups on FanDuel and Yahoo because we are allowed to. And we do the cash lineups and GPP lineups. So we give people options there. So sign up on the website, and then we'll send you an email to get you into our Discord. just sign up, by Sunday morning so that we can get you those lineups. Let's see here. What's next? Let's talk about some wide receivers, Josh. We've mentioned our quarterbacks. Who we want to pair them up with?
Well, I'm actually going to be looking to play my first wide receiver separate. It's going to be Cooper Kupp. He's 9,000 on DraftKings. He's been the best wide receiver in fantasy this year. He continues to see double-digit targets every single week. Last week, he had tied for his season high with 13 targets. He had 10 receptions on those 13 targets for 156 yards and 2 touchdowns. With the value at running back this week that we're kind of spending down for, I feel like there's no reason not to pay up for Cooper Kupp again and take advantage of this extremely high target share that we're seeing with him. And Pro Football Focus, they agree with that. They project him to be the highest scoring wide receiver on the slate with 23.5 fantasy points.
He has been tremendous. Would not bet against him as long as he stays healthy all year. What a rapport with Stafford. Speaking of a strong rapport, how about Jamar Chase lately? I mean, what a playmaker. 6 touchdowns now. Last 3 games, he's averaging 6 catches for 152. And he's only 7,500 on DraftKings. He's got that matchup against the Jets. I'd like to pair him up with Burrow. And again, speaking of Pro Football Focus, he's got an 80.3 matchup advantage. Best matchup on the team, running 46% of his routes out on the left side. So I'd like to pair those guys up. 14-6 to get those 2 guys together is not bad for a combo that's really consistent and just getting hotter and hotter each week.
Yeah, I definitely like Burrow and Chase. Probably my second favorite pairing on the slate. So,
all right. Well, if we want to save a little bit at our other wide receiver positions, where are you looking there?
I'm going to drop 1,000 from Chase and go to Keenan Allen. He's 6,500 on DraftKings. I just feel like he's just simply too talented to keep, underperforming every week for the rest of the year. Coming off the bye week, I think that the Chargers are going to look at trying to find more ways to get him involved in the offense. And the Patriots are 19th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, so just a little below average. At less than 7K, I feel like given this matchup, the upside is there. Just look for him to be a nice tournament play in that mid-range for wide receivers.
Yeah, and speaking of the news, Eckler is questionable. And if he's out, I think Allen could get even a few more targets because we know Eckler has a big target share in that offense. So I like that play. My next guy here is another Jaguar. I can't believe how much I'm talking about Jacksonville, Josh. But Marvin Jones Jr. is 5,900, and DJ Chark is out for the season. So, he's the guy on the outside. He's got the best matchup, according to Pro Football Focus. Again, our partners, 46% on the right side. And with Chark out in that last game, he got 42% of the air yards. So he's that primary downfield threat. Could get in the end zone once or twice. And then I'll give honorable mention here on the Jags to Jamal Agnew, who is only 3,700. He's had 11 catches the last 2 weeks, including some chunk plays. So, man, I hope the Jaguars light it up this week because I'm going to have some exposure to them.
Yeah, if they do, you're probably going to be sitting really pretty too, because I don't see anybody touting the Jaguars this week. So,
all right. Do you have another receiver for us?
Yeah, so I'm going to be looking at Michael Pittman, 5,300 on DraftKings. Has the best matchup this week on paper against Tennessee. They've allowed the most fantasy points to wide receivers this year. He scored 20-plus points in 2 of his last 3 starts and, had his best game last week in the pouring down rain in San Francisco. He had 5 receptions for 105 yards and a touchdown. And this week he gets a little bit of a reprieve as he goes back home indoors. So against this bad Tennessee defense. So I really like, what the potential is there for Pittman and pairing him up, of course, with Carson Wentz. So,
yep, absolutely. We'll keep an eye on T.Y. Hilton, who's questionable, who could impact things a little bit.
Yeah.
One more for me here. It's Cole Beasley. He's under 5K. He's got Miami, and we've targeted them in the slot here for a long time now, it feels like, because This, Needham just doesn't get it done. That's their weak spot. And Miami's given up the third most fantasy points to wide receivers. Guys on the inside have done really well against Miami recently. AB and Godwin just smashed them. The Jacksonville guys did as well. And Beasley coming off that real strong game against Tennessee. We had him in a number of lineups, did really well with him. And I think he can go back to back here. I think Buffalo does look at these matchups, and Beasley can either be kind of an afterthought or he can really be featured in the game plan. So hopefully it'll be the latter again this week.
Yeah. I have Beasley written down also as one of my top value plays on the slate. So definitely like putting him together with you can put him together with Josh Allen in cash or tournaments, I think, just to help save some salary.
Agreed. All right. Are we ready for the tight end position?
Yep. I'm ready for tight ends.
All right. Lead us off, good sir.
All right. So I've got Hunter Henry once again. I think this is the third or maybe even fourth week in a row. 4,200. He's scored a touchdown in 4 straight games. So that's the main reason why I keep playing him. He's going to be back in LA this week against his former team. This is another matchup for him that fares very well for him. They've allowed the second most fantasy points to tight ends New England has. And I think he's going to be 5 straight weeks of scoring a touchdown. And I think he might even get in there more than once.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I like the narrative. Great consistency, like you said. And Jones really trusting those tight ends. I am going to go, instead of a guy who's had a touchdown in 4 straight, I'm looking at a guy who hasn't scored since week 2. That's TJ Hawkinson, who I think is due.
Yeah.
He's been getting the targets, 20 in the last 2 weeks. But Goff hasn't got him in the end zone. But this is a great matchup. Philly, number 6, most fantasy friendly to the tight ends. And, we had success with O.J. Howard in that matchup, remember? So, if Howard can get it done, Hawkinson certainly can. So, 5,400 for a stud, I think is a very fair price.
Yeah, no, I definitely like TJ Hawkinson. Being in our division, I've seen quite a bit of him, and he's very impressive, so definitely like him from the tight end university at Iowa.
That's right.
Yeah, so for me, for my second option at tight end, I'm going to be going to the guy that you must be a fan of, as he helped you win quite a bit of money this year, CJ Uzomah, 3,600. He's got another, good matchup this week against the Jets. They've allowed the 7th most fantasy points to tight ends. And so, pairing him up with Burrow in tournaments makes a lot of sense, but he can be used in both formats. He had 3 catches for 91 yards and 2 touchdowns last week against Baltimore, who they are the worst in fantasy against tight ends. But I think that this is another matchup that really favors Uzomah, and he can have another big day.
Yeah, he doesn't get a ton of targets, but he does a lot with those targets. Big plays repeatedly. So he could certainly get it done. All right, before we hit those defenses, just want to invite folks to subscribe to the channel if they haven't already. We're producing 11 podcasts per week across our 4 sports. So if you hit the thumbs up, we'd really appreciate that, and keep tuning in, and we'll keep creating these podcasts. Defense here. Let me go with the pay up option to start.
Okay.
The Rams, 5,100 on DraftKings. That is a big price. So this is, I'm really kind of playing around with it here to see if I want to invest there. But Houston, number 30 in points, number 30 in yards. It's kind of says all you need to say right there. And, if you really want an interesting GPP lineup, you could go with the Rams and David Johnson, because, he can catch a bunch of balls and not even score and hit value. But, we'll see. I think it's worth considering. But I also want to look at some cheaper defenses. So do you have any in mind?
Yeah. So for me, my top option is going to be Buffalo. They're 3,300. They probably should be the highest owned defense on this slate, I would think, because of their matchup and their price. They shut out Miami earlier this week, so that's another reason they should draw a lot of ownership. Pro Football Focus has them projected as the second highest defense this week, behind only the Rams, who you mentioned, but they're $1,800 cheaper than LA. So
yeah, that's significant.
Very popular.
Yeah, that's a big savings. Definitely worth a look. Another team in that price range I'm thinking about, the 49ers at 3,500 on DraftKings. They've got the Bears, and this is the lowest total on the board, 39.5. 49ers favored by 4. So the implied total for Chicago is ultra low, and they're 30th in points as well. They're tied with Houston. They're actually last in yardage on the season. Herbert is a nice little bright spot for him, but Fields just not quite getting it done yet. So I think you can feel pretty solid about the 49ers because both teams want to run the ball. So it's just one of those games that would be very surprising if it's high scoring.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And then for me, to finish it off, I'm going to be looking to basically for a punt play, and that's going to be the Washington. They're 2,100, so they're almost the cheapest defense on the whole slate, but they scored 7 and 8 fantasy points against Green Bay and Kansas City. So 2 pretty prolific offenses, and Denver is not. They're 24th in points per game at only 20. Sorry, Joe, but
yeah, Joe, plug your ears.
And on top of that, Washington still has one of the best front fours in the league. So I do like Washington as a punt play, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to be going pretty heavily with Buffalo this week.
Yeah, that price tag has my eye as well. So, all right, well, great. We breezed through that. If anybody has any questions, you can reach out to us on Twitter at DFS Coach Talk. Put some comments on the YouTube channel if you'd like. We always respond to those. Or if you want to get more into strategy and bankroll management and all that, you can just jump in with us as a member, and we can share the Coach Talk process with you. So dfscoachtalk.com if you want to join us. Any final thoughts here, Josh?
No, not really. I think we hit this week pretty good. And like you said, our thoughts have aligned, pretty well on this slate. So looking forward to a big week.
Excellent. We also will have the Primetime podcast coming out later this weekend. So make sure to check that one out as we break down the showdown slates on Sunday and Monday night, as we always do. So that will wrap it up here for the main slate. Thank you again for tuning in. On behalf of Josh Crash Davis and the rest of the DFS Coach Talk team, I'm Andrew Hanson. We'll see you next time as we look to crush it in DFS.